Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. We are lucky enough to have as a guest today our Congresswoman from the 1st Congressional District, Michelle Lujan Grisham. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm delighted. It's been a long time, and I'm so excited that you extended this invitation. Thanks,
Well,
Lorene.
I've been watching from afar, even at the State of the Union address. There you were in the audience and with the other House members, and I'm really proud of the work that you've been doing in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's such a huge honor. I still have to pinch myself about how incredible it is that I get to be in that place, in that chamber, making history and fighting every day for New Mexico and New Mexicans. So it's incredible, and I'm so honored to get to have this job.
Well, you have a long history of fighting for New Mexico and New Mexicans. You were our first, before it was even a cabinet division, you were the director of the Agency of Aging and Long-Term Care Services.
Right.
And then you became the cabinet secretary for that same agency. Then you became our cabinet secretary for health. You've been the Bernalillo County Commissioner. You're a small business owner. All of this stuff, an amazing background that you bring to your work as a representative.
Thank you. I'm going to have you introduce me everywhere I go. I've been very fortunate to get to work on the things that I think make a difference and certainly matter to me, making sure that people can live with dignity and respect and have every opportunity to succeed. And those are easy things to work for. They're not always things that are easy to succeed at.
Yes, but it's the journey, not always the destination.
That's right.
Thank you. You're the 12th generation New Mexican?
Well, that's as far as we can prove. I've got a great genealogist on staff that does that as a hobby. And so we can definitely do 12. I think it's closer to 14 or 15. But in any event, it is a proud New Mexico legacy with descendants coming right over from Spain with the conquistadors, and been here ever since.
Yes, thank you. So I watch as Mrs. Smith, you went off to Washington, and I thought, what an interesting time to be in that cauldron. There was so much partisanship, and now we have new leadership. So can you give us just a little sense of what the experience has been like? What was the most unexpected thing that you learned about serving in? And what is your inspiration?
Oh, I really appreciate that, because I came from an environment where we were very bipartisan and to a certain degree even nonpartisan in New Mexico. And then as a county commissioner, right, there's 5 of us, so you can get 5 folks to really think about ways where they agree and want to cooperate in order to get things done. And in fact, I don't know that most people even remember that I worked for 3 different governors, Democrats and a Republican, and so I didn't even really think about partisan issues. But in my race for the House, for Congress, it was a very partisan race even, and I'm doing what all Americans do and all New Mexicans. I get a lot of my information, in social media and on the news, and I'm looking at this Congress that's broken and not doing anything. They can't pass legislation, and that's the attitude that I have, that needs a whole new group to get to D.C. and get it resolved. And here's really what I've learned, that there's truth to the inability of us to work together. But it is not entirely true that it is so partisan that there is no congeniality or effort between us to work. And I will really highlight the role that women, in fact, have played. So my first year in Congress was arguably, based on the number of bills that get introduced and get passed, was the worst year in the history of this body. So
Wow.
Since the Constitution.
Trial by fire.
That's right. Worst Congress. I spent most of my time voting on naming coins and post offices. And we had a government shutdown, right? And yet, we passed the 5-year farm bill, and women, after it was defeated on the floor, got it back together.
Yeah.
They led that in the Senate, bipartisan group of women. It was that same bipartisan group of women in the Senate and the House, which I belong to and participate in, who got the first budget passed, which led then to this year where we did or 2015, we did a 2-year budget, which led to the first omnibus appropriations bill and act, both signed by the president, and the opportunity now to work on many more things. So, do I think that we have solved all of those partisan issues? Not by a long shot, but not enough media attention to where we have come together, are starting to work things out, and really focusing on the things that matter, problem solving. And I actually expect the new speaker, who, true to his word, did not have a shutdown over the Affordable Care Act and Planned Parenthood, that passed a 2-year budget, and did a very democratic agenda, actually, in the omnibus appropriations bill. He wants to work on health care reform and tax reform and small business investments and innovations this Congress, and I want to give him every opportunity to do that in a bipartisan manner.
Excellent, excellent. Now, we'll spend most of our time talking about particular New Mexico issues, but you are carrying some legislation on the federal level that will affect us very much. It's got the catchy name of Care Corps.
You know, Care Corps, I went to Congress to really work on health care, and my passion, as you know, has long been long-term care, and I'm a caregiver for my mom, and I've been a caregiver for many adults, including my adult sister who died at 21 and had a significant health care challenges and was developmentally disabled. And so I've got a long history, both professionally and just personally, making sure that the right care at the right time is provided. And the debate about long-term care is always about nursing homes and how much in-home care and whether that should be paid for by Medicare and Medicaid and how you can get private insurance and trying to get ready for that. And the reality is, because we already don't know what to do with those entitlement programs over the long haul, we just get stalled out. So Care Corps is a way to think out of the box, but address these pressing long-term care needs, which are growing at a rapid pace we cannot keep up.
Well, also the baby boomers.
You bet.
Here
Baby
we come.
boomers. We don't have enough caregivers to even provide the care under the current system. They're just not there. So this is creating a national service program modeled after the Peace Corps, except that it's domestic. And so we're going to take young people or folks that have started college that didn't finish or who have college loans that they can't pay and can't get a job, and we're going to recruit them. We're going to pay for housing and stipend. We're going to take you out of your community, move you into another community so that you learn all about that. You're completely immersed. And then we're going to have you trained to do unskilled caregiving. So what does that mean? Well, I caregive for my mom. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody showed up who just cared about her, was her friend, was interested in her life story, her life's work, who also helped me with maybe driving her to a doctor's appointment, who alerted me if her meds didn't show up, who was engaged if the dog ran away, because those real life issues happen, and my skilled caregivers can't address them. And those kinds of things are enough not only to really destroy my mom's emotional well-being, but they can actually have a very physical and negative impact on her health status. You bet. And think about the New York kid who gets to come out here and meet one of the last Navajo code talkers. The last best generation. Incredible opportunities. And it also resolves the conflict, particularly in long-term care and entitlements that we have between a younger generation and an older generation. And I think this country needs something to be proud of. So Care Corps has been endorsed by literally hundreds of healthcare and long-term care organizations, and I'm really gratified by its momentum, and it led to creating a new caucus in Congress that's both chambers, so it's bicameral and it's bipartisan.
Excellent. You are, for years, you've been my go-to person on health. Give us some statistics about what's happening with health care now, of what the Affordable Care Act has done. And there's something coming up again in the National Congress, the transparency bill.
That's right. That's a bill that I'm actually launching. So the Affordable Care Act did wonderful work, in my opinion, in making sure that we dealt with pre-existing conditions, so you can't be denied health insurance, and doing something about making sure that young people, we have to have them insured, that we really focused there. So it's really about access, right? But the Affordable Care Act was not about cost. And until we start to address patient cost, you don't have true access. You don't have true access, we're not going to have quality in the healthcare system. We're going to still really struggle with healthcare outcomes in this country. And I really worry about New Mexico. When you don't have enough competition in the marketplace, and when our premiums, even if you're subsidized on that premium, which is great, if my out-of-pocket cost, my deductible is $2,500 to $5,000, you can't do it. And then if you have co-pays on top of that are in the hundreds of dollars, depending upon what the procedure or the service or the visit is, here's what happens. We know what happens. Ask Medicare beneficiaries. They don't go. They don't get the MRI. They don't get the test. They don't get the bone density scan. They don't get the colonoscopy. So we end up treating in hospitals for cancer that we could have cured because we'd have found it earlier if you'd gotten the test. We have to get that addressed, and I'm hoping that this year we're going to stop this, repeal the Affordable Care Act, leave it entirely alone, because that's not what policymaking is about. It's about addressing the issues as they arise and do everything you can to minimize them. And I do think this is a Congress that's going to get engaged again in finding now the right balances in the Affordable Care Act. But inside that debate, I learned something from New Mexico constituents, because it really is in all healthcare. We chase where they'll pay us, right? So even though we dealt with access, insurance companies and providers both chase where they'll get reimbursed. And here's a little known fact that actually found out about by New Mexico constituents who had not triplets, not twins, born prematurely in a neonatal unit in a hospital that's covered by their healthcare plan. Except the neonatalists were on contract by a healthcare provider in Florida. So when it was all said and done, they were billed tens of thousands of dollars that their insurance company refused to pay initially because they were out of network. Now you're in the hospital. You go to the hospital that's in your provider group. You get the care that you receive. Why would any patient need to ask whether certain providers inside that hospital were in or out of network? Feels really disingenuous to me, and I don't think in an acute, in an emergency situation, any patient should be required to have to figure out what they might be responsible for outside of what they're already aware of inside their insurance coverage. So I was appalled. We got it addressed. I want to give journalism and journalists here a plug, because actually they got involved and came to us. Larry Barker came right over and said, this is outrageous.
Yeah.
What do you think about it? I think it's outrageous, so we've got a bill. It says no more surprise billing, and I want total transparency. So I don't care if you have contract doctors, but then you're paying them. Once I'm covered, I'm covered. If they're in that hospital's in my system, you can't surprise bill me, and you're transparent about it at the front end. And I'm really, that's an important bill to me. It's supported by most of the, in fact, I think it is supported by the National Insurance Council organization or association for the U.S., and many states have brought similar legislation, and I would encourage New Mexico to bring that legislation as soon as they can.
Well, we're speaking today with Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham from New Mexico's 1st District. I have interviewed you over the years, and what people have to know about you is the kind of fighter you are for your constituents. And when you were early, before the Department of Aging and Long-Term Care Services was a cabinet post, you were the director. You would go undercover to these nursing homes. You yourself, you wouldn't, send an employee. You would go there. You would see what they did, ghastly things to you, and you would come back and right the wrongs. So I've known you've been doing this for like 25 years. This is one of the things I love about you.
Now everybody knows just how old I am.
Oh, no.
I had them fooled. I was just going to be 30. Now it's done.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, and I'm so grateful. But there's a story this last year that just intrigued me. You stood in line at the Social Security office in Albuquerque. This is an example of what you do for your constituents, and it's a great story. Of course, we have limited time. Can you give us a short version, but tell us where you went and what happened?
Oh, I really appreciate that, because I'm still really mad about it, but happy that Social Security is now responding to us. So the Social Security office is in a midtown, central area, the old office in Albuquerque, and it's an old office and didn't quite work for the employees, and I certainly understand that. But it had parking. parking. It was on a bus route. So we were involved because people were very upset that the Social Security office was moving downtown where they have no parking. But in addition, as we were dealing with that issue, I was hearing from many constituents about how poorly they were treated by that particular office. And that, in fact, to get in, you'd have to be in line for an hour before they opened. That means that you're in line with no shade and no water, and people are extremely disabled in the direct sun from 7 to 8:30 in the morning, and lined up with no place to sit. I saw people with walkers, wheelchairs, canes, amputees, people who hadn't eaten, people with no transportation, insufficient clothing to protect them from sunburns, or in the winter, can you imagine, to protect them from the elements. And then that had been going on for more than a year, where they had more than 100 people waiting. And then you get inside. It's more difficult to get into the Social Security office than it is to visit a loved one in jail in terms of the screening. It is completely inappropriate. And then you get in and you got to wait again, and there's only a couple windows open. And so I got in line. I could have gone right in as a member of Congress or a VIP or a dignitary, and I got in line. And I couldn't hang. I got umbrellas, water, chairs, whatever I could to help people, because I was so outraged by how disrespectful they were being treated. I waited my turn. I got screened. They got mad at me about my phone. They got mad about my keys. They got mad about everything. I had to take off my coat, way worse than getting on an airplane. And then I sat again, and then they asked me what I was there for, and I just said I wanted to get a sense about how people were treated, the very people who were here for the very benefit that they worked for, many of whom are for the first time getting emergency relief and are homeless. And I talked to one constituent who lost his job because the only time he could get there was right before his job, and it would take 3 hours. And they tell you can do it online, but even if you do it online, you still have to come in for a face-to-face interview. There's just no way around it. So long story short, we put that out there. I was outraged. I went right to the Social Security Administration. They moved, and then I fought them about their treatment, their parking. They didn't even have a handicapped drop-off zone in downtown Albuquerque. So I'm happy to report we've won it. They are building a drop-off zone. They are including metered parking that will be at no cost to anyone who is dealing with a disability. And the Social Security office is on notice that at any time, anywhere, on any day, I might show up, and I'd like to see just exactly how people are being treated and how long it takes for them to get in that office. And I think there are significant issues with that office and others that warrant further review by the appropriate agencies. I'm not satisfied that everything is quite right, but I do want to give them credit for resolving at least the parking and access issues downtown.
Well, and also I want to give you credit for going undercover, being in line. You have a program now called Michelle, In Line with Michelle.
We do. We're going to launch that, getting in line or in line with Michelle, because I think too many of us are really treated unfairly and inappropriately by a variety of public sector entities. And, they work for us. And I'm working hard. You're working hard. These New Mexicans are working 2 and 3 jobs. They're raising their families. It's really hard out there. And it'd be nice if everybody who is supposed to be providing that assistance and helping hand and support would treat us with the respect that we deserve. And so I'm going to fight for that every single day.
Well, we're going to move to what would be called the lightning round, because there's so many New Mexico issues that I'd like you to talk about. Real ID. We've been bathed in a disinformation campaign that you have to get a passport and you won't be able to go anywhere. And yet the TSA and other federal agencies have said, you're fine for 2 more years, you're going to get this straightened out. For a couple of federal installations, you might have to show another form of ID, but it's not the big crisis that it's been painted to be.
It really isn't. I want to start with this component, which is, the Real ID is not new. It's federal legislation that was required. I think it's 6 years old now. It might be even older. And the reality is we're using it in order to create a political divide in this state, so that individuals, and they have every right, individuals and policymakers, to have this as an opinion, that they don't believe that anybody who's undocumented ought to have a driver's license. I disagree with that, but I understand that may be their political issue. But they're using a federal law to use that as credibility for that particular agenda. So here are the facts. Many states offer driver's licenses to undocumented drivers. And those states are compliant with Real ID. And the way that you're compliant with Real ID is you have a two-tiered license system, which this legislature, bipartisan, last year in the Senate passed.
Stu Engel, John Arthur Smith, it was a great bill.
You bet. And it was Real ID compliant. The New Mexico delegation has secured in writing that that the federal government will work with the New Mexico state legislature and the governor on a two-tiered or like proposal that meets the requirements but allows those, if they win it, who want to have driver's licenses available for drivers, no matter who you are. So I think that's a public safety issue, that you can do that. And so the publicity that says that you need a passport to fly is just plain false. The only issue is that if you work at a federal installation, there are different requirements, which is why we need the legislature to get this done, so that the IDs that we would have then would be available for military installations, which, by the way, already require a higher level of scrutiny that those folks have had to meet.
Yeah, and as I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, 32 other states are not Real ID compliant yet. Everybody's just been moving low and slow.
Right. We're going to have to do something.
Yeah.
True. Many people don't love this federal law. True. This is a federal law on the books. We're going to have to deal with it. But the notion that somehow that New Mexicans are being held hostage because we've got individuals who have two varying opinions about driver's licenses, not Real ID, driver's licenses, is a complete falsification of the facts. And I'm so glad that you've raised this. And I travel every week, and I hand my New Mexico driver's license right to TSA, and I will continue to do that. And when I get a new ID that I hope gets mailed to me by virtue of a bipartisan bill that the governor signs, that driver's license will be the license and the ID that I will show every time I fly. And ladies and gentlemen, I fly nearly every week.
Yeah.
I do not take a passport.
SNAP and food assistance. What are we, third in the nation in hungry children, first in the nation in child poverty?
Our child welfare issues are so negative and so awful. It is difficult for me to imagine what's really happened in the state. And I serve on the Ag Committee, Lorene, and we talk about food security and SNAP all of the time. And I'm actually very worried about the new work requirements. I want people to work, and we all do. We want them to have opportunities to work. It's the only way out of poverty.
Yeah.
Staying on government benefits isn't a way out of poverty. It wasn't intended to be. It never will be. But do you know that if you get a $200 raise, if you're working and on, say, food assistance SNAP, that you will lose $600 in benefits to accept a $200 raise if you're at the top end of that threshold. Now, what mother and what father would be doing justice to raising their children if they lost their housing because they took that $200 raise?
Yeah.
They can't do it. So we have a cliff effect. The work requirements don't work. And in a state with the highest unemployment rates in the country, and even higher when you look at minority populations, women as single heads of household, and veterans, all of which we have large per capita numbers, larger than many of our sister states, why would you ask senior citizens to have to get jobs in order to keep that SNAP benefit? Without that nutrition, can't take their meds, right in the hospital, we're going to pay way more. And why would you create a situation where children are going to have limited access to nutrition support? I think they ought to be investing in more job training, more with I call cliff benefit protections by helping people get out of poverty. And I think that the current work requirements, New Mexico needs to ask for a waiver from the federal government. And I'm going to be seeing the governor next week, and that's certainly something on my agenda to ask her to reconsider.
Good. We really have a minute and a half left. I want to thank you, as your work on the Agricultural Committee, for the work you did with the cattle and that huge blizzard that the southeastern part of the state had. It was just ghastly. So many cows were lost. And I know that you've been assisting them in getting some federal relief.
We are, and I want to thank the whole delegation. So this is a nonpartisan issue. I want to give the entire delegation a shout out. We're going to make sure that the USDA programs that provide monetary relief for the loss of those cows. But again, it's where in New Mexico we have the largest dairy herds in the country, and so there's a cap on the number of cattle you can identify for relief. So we're all going to work maybe on some additional legislative relief. We're going to be as creative as we can, because as the snow thaws, we're very concerned we're going to find that it had even more terrible effects, and we have even more cattle lost as a result. Can't identify them all currently.
We didn't get to ethics. I'm assuming you're in favor. And the Justice and Mental Health Collaboration Program we'll have to save for another time, because I want to know, what is your message to New Mexicans, and what does the future hold for you and New Mexico? And do you share the President's optimism with which he spoke in the State of the Union
Well,
message?
how about if we go to the latter, since we're out of time? You bet I share that optimism. You know, here, to have the President just put out there, we're going to cure cancer. You bet. That's exactly what this country's known for. If we say it and we're dedicated to it, we always achieve that. So I am optimistic about the future. I think we can meet these challenges. And as I say that, I recognize that the challenges here are significant. And the entire state has to have a positive, optimistic, can-do attitude so that we can build ourselves back to a place where we don't have all of these negative outcomes. And every child in the state of New Mexico and every family has a plan for success. I'm going to fight for that in Congress, and they should expect all their local policymakers to be fighting for the same thing.
Well, we will close on that wonderful note. Thank you. Our guest today is Congresswoman Michelle Lujan Grisham. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us what your experience in Congress has been and what we have to look forward to. Thank you.
Lorene. This has been great.
Yes.
Happy New Year.
Yes. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all of you, our audience out there. We'd like to thank you for joining us today on Report from Santa Fe. I'm Lorene Mills. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.